Ellen DeGeneres had hosted countless conversations about walking in someone else's shoes throughout her decades-long career, from discussions about empathy and understanding to interviews exploring different life experiences, but nothing could have prepared her for the afternoon, when what seemed like a routine conversation about overcoming adversity would evolve into a literal exchange of life experiences that would challenge everything she understood about privilege, struggle, and the complexity of human existence. What started as an inspiring interview about resilience became an unprecedented experiment in perspective that would force both Ellen and her guests to confront the realities of each other's daily existence in ways they had never imagined possible. It was a contemplative Monday afternoon at the Ellen Studios, and the atmosphere was thoughtful as they prepared for what was scheduled to be a moving episode about perseverance, social justice, and finding hope in difficult circumstances. Ellen, wearing a sophisticated burgundy blazer over charcoal pants, was looking forward to interviewing Rosa Martinez, a 34-year-old single mother and community advocate whose journey from homelessness to becoming a social worker and housing rights activist had been featured in several human interest stories and advocacy publications. Rosa's story was exactly the kind of powerful narrative that Ellen loved to feature, someone who had faced seemingly insurmountable challenges, had refused to be defined by her circumstances, and was now dedicating her life to helping others navigate similar hardships. According to her preliminary materials, Rosa had experienced homelessness with her 2 young children for over a year, had worked multiple minimum wage jobs while pursuing her college degree, and had ultimately earned her master's degree in social work, while continuing to advocate for affordable housing policies and support services for families in crisis. Our next guest knows what it means to fight for survival and dignity in a system that often makes both feel impossible, Ellen announced to the attentive studio audience. She's turned her personal struggles into a mission to help other families facing homelessness and poverty. Her story reminds us that strength comes from struggle, and that sometimes the people who understand problems best are those who have lived them. Please welcome social worker and housing advocate Rosa Martinez. The audience offered warm, respectful applause as Rosa walked onto the stage with quiet dignity and composed strength. She was a petite woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical style, wearing a simple but well-chosen navy dress that suggested someone who had learned to present herself professionally despite limited resources. What struck Ellen most was the combination of warmth and guardedness in Rosa's eyes, someone who had learned to be open while protecting herself, generous while being cautious. "Rosa, welcome to the show," Ellen said warmly as they embraced gently. "Thank you for having me, Ellen." "This is quite an experience," Rosa replied, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had learned to choose words carefully and speak with intention. "Tell us about your journey from homelessness to becoming a social worker. That must have been an incredibly difficult transition." Rosa's expression became serious as she began sharing her story. "Ellen, when people hear about homelessness, they often think about individual failures or poor choices. But the reality is that most families are just one crisis away from losing housing. For me, it was a medical emergency that wiped out our savings and led to eviction. How did you manage to keep going while taking care of your children?" "You do what you have to do," Rosa said simply. "I worked overnight cleaning jobs so I could be with my kids during the day. We slept in my car, in shelters when space was available, sometimes on friends' couches. The hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort, it was maintaining my children's sense of safety and normalcy." As Rosa spoke, Ellen felt a growing sense of admiration mixed with an uncomfortable awareness of the vast difference between their life experiences. "Rosa, I have to be honest. Listening to your story makes me realize how little I understand about the daily reality of poverty and housing insecurity." Rosa looked at Ellen with curiosity rather than judgment. "Most people don't understand, and there's no shame in that. The problem comes when people make policies or judgments about situations they've never experienced." Ellen felt compelled to acknowledge her privilege more directly. "Rosa, I live in a world where my biggest daily stress is probably choosing between different professional opportunities. I can't imagine trying to focus on work or school while worrying about where my children will sleep that night. And I can't imagine having cameras follow me around all day, having millions of people watch my every move, or feeling responsible for entertaining and uplifting others, even when I might not feel entertaining or uplifting myself," Rosa replied thoughtfully. Ellen paused, struck by Rosa's insight into the pressures of her own life. "You're right. There are challenges in my life that I don't often talk about publicly." Rosa leaned forward with genuine interest. "Ellen, what would it be like if we could actually understand each other's daily reality? Not just talk about it, but experience it." Ellen found herself intrigued by Rosa's question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we could swap lives for 24 hours? You could experience what it's like to worry about rent, to choose between gas money and groceries, to navigate social services with children in tow, and I could experience what it's like to live with fame, wealth, and the pressure of being a public figure." Ellen felt simultaneously curious and apprehensive about Rosa's suggestion. "Rosa, that's a fascinating idea, but obviously impossible to actually do." Rosa smiled with an expression that seemed to suggest she wasn't entirely joking. "Is it impossible, or is it just something we've never tried?" As Rosa spoke these words, Ellen began experiencing an unusual sensation. The studio lights seemed to shift slightly, and she felt a strange tingling awareness throughout her body, as if her consciousness were becoming more flexible and expansive. "Ellen," Rosa said softly, "I think something is happening here. Are you feeling different?" Ellen looked down at her hands and noticed that her expensive manicure had been replaced by short, practical nails showing signs of physical work. Her burgundy blazer felt heavier, more worn, and when she looked in the monitor across the studio, she saw her own face but with an expression of weariness and determination that wasn't typically there. "Rosa, this is impossible, but I think I'm experiencing what you described," Ellen said, her voice carrying a new weight of anxiety about financial security that she had never felt before. Rosa looked at her own hands and saw perfectly manicured nails and expensive rings that hadn't been there moments before. "Ellen, I think I'm experiencing your life too. I suddenly feel this overwhelming sense of responsibility to be owned for all these people, to be funny and uplifting even though I'm feeling uncertain about what's happening." Ellen felt a crushing wave of worry about monthly expenses, rent payments, and her children's needs that was completely foreign to her actual life experience. "Rosa, how do you function with this constant anxiety about money? I've been experiencing it for 30 seconds and I feel paralyzed." "You learn to compartmentalize," Rosa replied, but her voice now carried the polished confidence of someone accustomed to being in the public eye. "But Ellen, how do you handle this feeling that everyone is watching and judging your every move? I feel like I need to be perfect for all these people." Ellen was overwhelmed by the weight of financial insecurity combined with the responsibility of caring for children without sufficient resources. "I don't know how you do it. This level of stress about basic survival it's consuming. And I don't know how you handle the isolation that comes with fame," Rosa replied, experiencing Ellen's life from the inside. "I feel disconnected from authentic relationships because I can sense that people want something from me rather than just wanting to know me." Ellen turned to address the audience, speaking from Rosa's perspective of economic struggle. "Folks, I've been experiencing Rosa's daily reality for just a few minutes, and I'm already exhausted by the mental energy it takes to constantly calculate costs and weigh survival decisions." Rosa addressed the cameras from Ellen's perspective of celebrity pressure, and I'm discovering that wealth and fame come with their own kind of poverty, a poverty of privacy, authenticity, and the simple pleasure of being unknown in the world. Ellen felt tears forming as she experienced the bone-deep fatigue of working multiple jobs while worrying about her children's future. "Rosa, the strength it takes to live your life while maintaining hope and helping others. I had no idea." And Ellen, the courage it takes to be vulnerable in front of millions of people, to share your struggles publicly while maintaining optimism. "That's a different kind of bravery than I understood," Rosa replied, feeling the weight of public scrutiny and expectation. As they continued experiencing each other's realities, both women began gaining profound insights into the complexity and validity of struggles they had never personally faced. "Rosa, I'm realizing that I've been unconsciously privileged in ways I never recognized," Ellen said, speaking from the experience of economic insecurity. "The mental space that financial security creates, the ability to think about long-term goals instead of just surviving day to day, that's a luxury I took for granted. And I'm understanding that wealth doesn't eliminate suffering, it just changes the nature of the challenges," Rosa replied, experiencing the pressure and isolation of Ellen's position. "The responsibility you feel for other people's happiness and well-being is overwhelming in its own way." Ellen addressed the audience with new understanding. "What we're experiencing right now is teaching me that comparing struggles is pointless. Rosa's challenges aren't more or less valid than mine. They're just different, and both deserve recognition and compassion." Rosa nodded in agreement. "And I'm learning that privilege doesn't automatically make someone's life easy or their problems insignificant. Ellen carries burdens I never considered." As the interview continued, both women explored the insights they were gaining from literally walking in each other's shoes, discovering empathy and understanding at a depth that conversation alone could never have achieved. "Ellen, what would you want to change about the way society views poverty and homelessness?" Rosa asked, still speaking from Ellen's position of influence and platform. "I would want people to understand that these are systemic issues, not personal failures," Ellen replied, speaking from Rosa's lived experience. "The difference between stability and crisis is often just one unexpected expense or health emergency. Anyone could find themselves in this situation." "And Rosa, what would you want people to know about the responsibilities that come with platform and wealth?" Ellen asked. "That they're real and weighty," Rosa answered from Ellen's perspective. "The expectation to always be positive, to always have answers, to be a role model constantly, that's its own kind of pressure that shouldn't be dismissed." After what felt like hours, but had probably been only minutes, both women began feeling their own consciousness returning to their original bodies and circumstances. "Ellen, I think the swap is ending," Rosa said, her voice returning to its original tone and cadence. "I can feel it too," Ellen replied, looking down at her hands to see her familiar manicure restored. "But Rosa, what we just experienced, it's changed something fundamental in how I understand the world." Ellen addressed the cameras with profound emotion. "What just happened here is impossible to explain, but the empathy and understanding Rosa and I gained from experiencing each other's realities is something I'll carry with me forever." Rosa nodded in agreement. "Ellen, thank you for being willing to truly understand my experience, not just sympathize with it from a distance. That's the difference between charity and solidarity." 3 months later, Ellen announced the launch of a new foundation focused on affordable housing advocacy, with Rosa serving as the executive director. The foundation's approach was unique in that all policy recommendations came from people with lived experience of housing insecurity. 6 months later, both women appeared together again to discuss how their life swap experience had changed not only their personal perspectives, but their professional approaches to social issues and entertainment. "What that experience taught me," Ellen reflected months later, "is that true understanding requires more than listening to someone's story. It requires the humility to acknowledge what we don't know, and the courage to truly imagine what someone else's life feels like from the inside." The episode became a landmark moment for discussions about empathy, privilege, and the importance of centering lived experience in policy and social change efforts. Sometimes, Ellen would say in subsequent interviews, the most radical thing we can do is actually try to understand someone else's reality, instead of just thinking we understand it. "Rosa taught me the difference between sympathy and solidarity, because sometimes the most profound education happens when we stop observing other people's struggles and start experiencing them, and sometimes the greatest gift we can offer each other is the willingness to truly walk in someone else's shoes, even when that journey takes us to places we've never imagined going."